In the turbulent seas of life, where uncertainty and chaos reign, the Stoic emerges as a steadfast captain, navigating the tempest with an unwavering resolve. The Stoic art of decision-making, a timeless masterpiece forged in the crucible of ancient wisdom, beckons us to chart a course through life's crossroads with a clarity that transcends the ephemeral storms of emotion. Picture this, a lone ship confronting a raging sea, its hull battered by the relentless waves of circumstance. In such moments, the Stoic does not succumb to the whims of emotional turbulence. Instead, we draw strength from the teachings of those who trod this path before us. As the venerable Stoic philosopher Seneca once mused, "He who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive." This Stoic maxim echoes through the corridors of time, urging us to face life's decisions with the courage born of an acceptance of our mortality. In this acceptance, we find liberation from the shackles of fear and a path to true self-control. The Stoic artistry lies in the mastery of one's reactions to external events. Like the legendary Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet maintained the composure of a sage, we too can cultivate an inner citadel impervious to the assaults of destructive emotions. Aurelius, in his Meditations, bestowed upon us a timeless gift: "A very little is needed to make a happy life, it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." In the crucible of Stoicism, we discover that happiness is not contingent upon external circumstances but is an artful creation, sculpted by our responses to life's challenges. The Stoic, armed with the wisdom of Epictetus, understands that we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. The Stoic sage does not recoil from adversity, and instead, we embrace it as a chisel that refines the sculpture of our character. In the words of the Stoic poet Cleanthes, "Lead me, O Zeus, and thou, O Destiny, to that goal long ago to me assigned. I'll follow readily, but if my will prove weak, and wretched as I am, I must follow still." As we traverse the crossroads of life, let us wield the Stoic compass, guiding our decisions with the steady hand of reason. In the face of tumultuous seas, we stand united, a community of seekers marching towards the Stoic ideal. For in the Stoic journey, we find not just a philosophy, but a way of life, a life imbued with purpose, self-control, and an indomitable spirit. So, fellow travelers of the Stoic path, let us set sail into the unknown with the torch of wisdom illuminating our way. May the Stoic art of decision-making be our guiding star, and may our inner citadels stand impervious, echoing the timeless wisdom of Stoic sages throughout the ages. In the crucible of Stoicism, we confront the dichotomy of control, a powerful concept articulated by the Stoic philosopher Epictetus. He implores us to discern between the things within our control and those beyond it, urging us to focus our energies on the former. In a world brimming with uncertainties, this distinction becomes the bedrock upon which the Stoic edifice is erected. Imagine standing at the crossroads of a pivotal decision, the weight of the unknown pressing upon your shoulders. The Stoic, undeterred by the unpredictable nature of fate, invokes the wisdom of Epictetus that we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. In this choice lies the crux of Stoic decision-making, a profound realization that empowers us to transcend the tumult of circumstance and grasp the reins of our own destiny. As we delve deeper into the Stoic tapestry, the teachings of the philosopher Musonius Rufus beckon us to cultivate an inner resilience. He contends that true freedom is found in mastering oneself, a sentiment echoed by the Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who implores, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoic sage, standing at life's crossroads, becomes a beacon of inner strength amidst the chaos. The echo of Aurelius's words reverberates through the ages, inviting us to harness the power of our minds, transforming adversity into an opportunity for growth. In our shared journey along the Stoic path, we find solace in the words of the ancient philosopher Seneca, who challenges us to embrace challenges with a courageous spirit. "He who dreads death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive." In this daring perspective lies the Stoic ethos, a call to confront life's decisions with a fearless heart, unburdened by the shackles of fear. Picture now the Stoic community, a collective of individuals bound by the pursuit of virtue and the fortitude to face life's storms with equanimity. Seneca's wisdom resonates within this fellowship, echoing the sentiment that true living necessitates a fearless confrontation with the unknown. As we stand united at the crossroads, may the Stoic community serve as a sanctuary for those seeking clarity amidst the chaos. Together, we share the torch of wisdom, lighting the way for each other as we navigate life's intricate labyrinth. The Stoic art of decision-making, woven into the fabric of our collective journey, becomes not just a philosophy but a resilient tapestry that withstands the test of time. In the realm of decision-making, the Stoic luminary Epictetus emerges as a guiding force, wielding wisdom that cuts through the fog of uncertainty. Imagine, if you will, a mentor at your side, whispering insights from his timeless discourses as you stand at the crossroads of choice. Epictetus, with the clarity of a sage, invites us to scrutinize our perceptions and judgments. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak, he admonishes, urging us to engage in introspection before embarking on decisions. As we confront life's choices, let us heed his counsel and cultivate the art of listening to our own inner dialogue. In this introspective silence, clarity unfurls like a lotus, revealing the essence of our values. The Stoic sage, inspired by Epictetus, views external events as mere impressions, not binding dictates. It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them, he declares. In the crucible of decision-making, we are called to discern between the raw facts of a situation and the interpretations we layer upon them. To achieve clarity, we must strip away the unnecessary embellishments and see the unvarnished truth. Epictetus, with unwavering conviction, emphasizes the sovereignty of our will. You are not your body and hair but your will, he declares. Armed with this insight, we approach decisions with a profound understanding that our true essence lies in the choices we make. The Stoic journey, according to Epictetus, is a relentless pursuit of self-mastery, a quest to align our will with the natural order of the cosmos. As you grapple with life's crossroads, channel the Stoic resilience encapsulated in Epictetus's teaching, he who is brave is free. The Stoic sage, facing decisions with bravery, recognizes that freedom is not the absence of challenges but the audacity to confront them head-on. Embrace each decision as an opportunity to exercise your inner courage, for in bravery, clarity thrives. Epictetus, the Stoic mentor echoing through the annals of time, invites us to emancipate ourselves from the tyranny of external events, to listen to our inner dialogue, and to wield the sovereignty of our will with unwavering bravery. In the crucible of decision-making, may his teachings be your guiding light, illuminating the path to clarity and conviction. Consider the contemporary landscape of decision-making, a terrain fraught with complexities and rapid change. In this tumultuous sea, the wisdom of Epictetus, though ancient, resonates with profound relevance. Let us apply his teachings to navigate recent examples, unveiling the Stoic artistry in the face of modern challenges. In the realm of professional life, picture a corporate executive confronted with a pivotal decision amid a volatile market. Epictetus's counsel to scrutinize judgments echoes here. Instead of succumbing to the frenzy of external pressures, the executive engages in introspection. By carefully assessing the situation, separating facts from interpretations, and listening to the quiet wisdom within, clarity emerges. The decision, once obscured by noise, becomes a manifestation of deliberate, value-aligned choice. Zooming into the societal sphere, consider the challenges posed by divisive public discourse. Epictetus's emphasis on the sovereignty of will guides us here. In the face of conflicting opinions and polarizing narratives, individuals empowered by Stoic principles choose to exercise their will judiciously. They rise above the din of external influences, embracing decisions that align with their inner convictions and contribute to the greater good. In a world often swayed by external events, Stoicism becomes a beacon of personal agency and ethical decision-making. Now, reflect on the personal realm, where the pursuit of well-being intersects with a digital age inundated with information. Epictetus's call to focus on what is within our control resonates profoundly. Picture someone navigating the relentless barrage of information on social media, striving for mental clarity. The Stoic approach prompts a deliberate choice to filter the influx of external stimuli, focusing on cultivating a healthy inner dialogue. In this conscious decision to control one's attention, Stoicism becomes a modern antidote to information overload. In the face of recent global challenges, such as the pandemic, Epictetus' teaching that it is not events that disturb people, but their judgments concerning them becomes a guiding principle. Stoics navigate the uncertainties with a discerning mind, separating the harsh realities of the situation from the emotional responses they might trigger. This mindset fosters resilience and empowers individuals to make decisions rooted in rationality and adaptability. As we confront the crossroads of our contemporary lives, let the wisdom of Epictetus be a timeless compass. Whether in the boardroom, the public square, or the confines of our minds, the Stoic art of decision-making, drawn from ancient philosophy, finds poignant expression in the tapestry of our modern existence. In these examples, we witness the enduring relevance of Stoic principles, offering clarity and conviction in the face of the complexities of our time. In the modern hustle and bustle, the Stoic principles espoused by philosophers like Epictetus find practical application, offering a roadmap for navigating the complexities of contemporary life. Let's delve into how a modern individual can integrate these principles into their daily existence. 1. Discernment in decision-making scenario faced with a career-changing decision. Stoic application reflect on what is within your control in the decision-making process. Consider your values, long-term goals, and the aspects you can influence. Separate external pressures from your core judgments. This clarity allows you to make decisions aligned with your principles, fostering a sense of purpose. 2. Adopting the Stoic mindset in adversity scenario dealing with a personal setback or crisis. Stoic application embrace the Stoic teaching that it's not the events but our judgments about them that disturb us. When facing adversity, focus on your responses. Assess the situation objectively, acknowledging what is beyond your control. Redirect your energy towards what you can change, your perspective and your actions. This mindset fosters resilience and emotional well-being. 3. Sovereignty of will in digital age scenario managing information overload and digital distractions. Stoic application acknowledge that your mind is within your control. In the digital age, where information bombards us, practice discernment. Choose intentionally where to direct your attention, limiting exposure to negative influences. The Stoic approach involves recognizing that your will is a powerful tool in navigating the digital landscape with mindfulness and purpose. 4. Cultivating inner resilience in relationships scenario navigating interpersonal conflicts. Stoic application apply Epictetus' teaching on focusing on what is within your control, your responses, not the actions of others. When conflicts arise, detach emotionally, objectively assessing the situation. Rather than reacting impulsively, respond with rationality and empathy. This Stoic approach contributes to harmonious relationships and prevents destructive emotional responses. 5. Mindful living and well-being scenario striving for mental well-being in a fast-paced world. Stoic application embrace the Stoic notion that happiness is an internal creation. Amid the rush of modern life, practice mindfulness. Take moments for introspection, reflecting on your thoughts and reactions. By cultivating a Stoic mindset, you can find tranquility within, fostering mental well-being even in the midst of external chaos. By integrating these Stoic principles into everyday life, the modern individual can navigate challenges with resilience, make decisions rooted in clarity and conviction, and cultivate a sense of inner tranquility amidst the complexities of the contemporary world. The timeless wisdom of Stoicism serves as a guide, empowering individuals to lead a purposeful and fulfilling life. In conclusion, the application of Stoic principles in the modern world emerges as a beacon of intellectual fortitude and a source of profound resilience. As we traverse the intricate tapestry of contemporary existence, the teachings of philosophers like Epictetus reveal themselves as a timeless guide, offering pragmatic insights for navigating the complexities of our lives. The Stoic art of decision-making, rooted in discernment and rationality, empowers individuals to confront pivotal choices with a clarity that transcends the cacophony of external pressures. By embracing the dichotomy of control and focusing on what lies within our sphere of influence, we liberate ourselves from the tyranny of circumstance, steering our destinies with purpose. The sovereignty of will, a central tenet of Stoicism, becomes a philosophical lodestar in the digital age, where information inundates and distractions abound. By recognizing the autonomy of our minds, we can navigate the digital landscape with intentionality, fostering mindful living and preserving our mental well-being. In adversity, the Stoic mindset becomes a formidable ally, transforming setbacks into opportunities for growth. The emphasis on separating events from our judgments invites a resilient approach to life's challenges, promoting emotional equilibrium and fortitude. Moreover, the Stoic principles find resonance in interpersonal relationships, guiding individuals to navigate conflicts with empathy and rationality. By focusing on one's responses rather than external actions, Stoicism becomes a blueprint for fostering harmonious connections and contributing positively to the social fabric. As we distill the essence of Stoic philosophy into the crucible of modernity, it emerges not as a relic of antiquity but as a living, breathing philosophy that resonates with the intellectual needs of our time. The Stoic sage, with unwavering conviction, beckons us to rise above the tumult of the present, embracing a life of purpose, self-mastery, and inner tranquility. In the mosaic of contemporary intellectual thought, Stoicism stands as a testament to the enduring power of ancient wisdom. Its principles, seamlessly woven into the fabric of our lives, invite us to embark on a journey of intellectual exploration, self-discovery, and the relentless pursuit of a life well lived. In the Stoic narrative, the modern individual finds not just a philosophy but a profound and intellectual guide for navigating the intricate labyrinth of existence.